Hello to everyone and the internet. It is currently Wednesday, January 2nd. I'm Nathan of Washington. You are watching Culture Shock, the only show on the internet knows how to separate an issue of culture from an issue of politics. And this is the news. Alright, so James Cohmey really illustrates the difference between the political class and everybody else. See, Cohmey basically kept two articles, one for public view and one for upper echelon. Now, I'm going to read you an article concerning James Cohmey. I don't think I saved it to my Firefox tab. Shit! I forgot to save it. Ah, here we go. Took less time than it sometimes does. Okay. Cohmey kept two sets of records, one for public viewing, one for upper echelon. Former FBI Director James Cohmey illegally kept two sets of records at the Bureau, one that was fake and for public media consumption, and another that was real and only available for the upper echelon at the agency. According to national security expert Sarah Carter, Cohmey could be in deep trouble for attempting to obstruct justice during his tenure at the FBI. 100%FedUp.com reports. Fed Up, that's clever. Hannity started his show by addressing the stonewalling of the FBI and DOJ, of Trump's order to declassify and release unredacted documents related to the Russian collusion witch hunt. Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett told Hannity that President Trump has the constitutional authority to demand that the documents are declassified and released, and if they decide to defy the president, they should be fired immediately. Hannity then asked Sarah Carter about two sets of records at the FBI. Sarah, I'm hearing it gets worse than this. That there is potentially out there, if you will, two sets of records among the upper echelon of the FBI. One that was real, one that was made for appearances. Is there any truth to this? Carter responded, absolutely, Sean. Carter claimed that she's discussed the issue with several sources and that there is evidence indicating that the FBI had separate sets of books. Sean attempted to clarify that the FBI is using one set of books for the public and one set for the higher-ups in the FBI. An accusation the FBI has faced before. That's nothing new. I will not name names until all the evidence is out there, but there were certain people above Peter Strzok and above Lisa Page that were aware of this, Sarah said. It's a very mafioso type operation. I also believe that there are people within the FBI that have actually turned on their former employers, or even possibly testified in reporting what happened inside the FBI to both the Inspector General and possibly even a grand jury. Sean turned to Fox legal analyst Greg Jarrett to suggest that this is nothing short of a coup. Jarrett warned if they had two separate books, they were obstructing not only Congress, but they were obstructing justice. Jarrett continued to explain how the Trump-Russian investigation is a case study in how personal and political bias motivated the FBI and the Department of Justice to abuse their authority to target Trump to spy on the campaign. They broke the law in the process. Jarrett went on to explain that James Comey's FBI knew that the dossier was a phony, but they didn't care that they used it to frame Donald Trump, and that is a violation of multiple felony codes in the United States Criminal Code. Garrett continued, all of these people need to be brought before a grand jury by a serious and legitimate prosecutor and be held accountable. Sean Hannity asked what the American public is going to learn when the declassification takes place, and the unredacted documents are released. Hannity revealed that he was hearing from multiple sources that the FBI and DOJ are trying to slow walk this, and roll this out as absolutely slowly as possible, and that they're trying desperately to take out damning information inside the documents. Sarah Carter agreed, saying, I think that what we're going to see is an extraordinary abuse of power, one that we have never seen the likes of in the history of our country. Coming from officials in the FBI and DOJ, there will be an enormous amount of exculpatory evidence that should have been turned over to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. And as for the slow ruling, I am hearing the same. Listen to the incredible exchange here. Alright. We'll listen to a part of it real quick here. Hold on. There we go. Turn on my speakers.
Sarah Carter, Fox News investigative reporter, contributor, and he has the #1 best-selling book, The Russian Hoax. Greg Jarrett is with us, Fox News legal analyst. Thank you both. Let's start from a legal standpoint, Greg, if I may, and start with a simple question. They're demanding that the FBI, DOJ not comply with the president's order. I think there are numerous areas where constitutionally the president has the authority to do so. One is he has the power to declassify, A, and he has the power to release it, B, and hasn't this been done in the past by Democrats?
Oh, sure it has. And the legal authority for the president to make these decisions and order executive branch officials to comply with his order derives from Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution. It says the executive power shall be vested in the President of the United States. It goes on to explain that it is his job to be in charge of the executive branch and to enforce all laws.
I'm going to speed up a little bit
And
here.
if that is the case, I mean, it's certainly...
Be exonerated from. Then we know that it all goes back to Hillary, funneling
sped
money
up a bit.
to Fusion GPS through the law firm, hiring a foreign national, which is Christopher Steele using Russian lies, putting together the dossier. Then we know that the dossier contents were spread before the election for the purpose of really indoctrinating and misinforming the American people to influence them in their voting decision, if that's not bad enough. And we know it was used as the basis for 4 FISA warrants against Carter Page, a Trump campaign associate, and all of the information presented to the court was that phony dossier and these phony manufactured press reports from the same sources. So basically it is the dossier, and they never verified, never corroborated it, and then they also had a media leak strategy. And Lisa Page said they didn't have any information of any collusion 9 months into the investigation, so they start leaking for the purpose of what? To get the special counsel, which we know Cohmey also did. And then it seems like now you got a group of people that think that they know better than the American people, and they've got two separate, groups of books. One tells the truth and the other's for public consumption. That's a lie.
Well, if they have 2 separate books, then they're obstructing not only Congress, but they're obstructing justice. This whole Trump-Russia investigation is a case study in how personal and political bias motivated the FBI and the Department of Justice to abuse their authority to target Trump, to spy on his campaign. They broke the law in the process. As I explain in my book, The Russia Hoax, James Comey's FBI department guidelines were completely violated by him and McCabe and Strzok and Page. They never had the legal basis to launch the investigation. They had no probable cause, no evidence of crimes. They invented and exaggerated facts based almost entirely on a fabricated dossier that they knew was from a British spy who was not credible. And all they had to do was read it, and they would have said, this is garbage. But they didn't care. They used it.
So in short, there are some experts who really believe that these 2 different books exist. And it is true that the Steele dossier, there are many stories suggesting that dossier was thrown together by and paid for to the order of a British spy. This truly illustrates the difference between the political class and the other 3 classes underneath, the rich, the middle, and the working. Because their evil is so much eviler than ours. Their evil, when politicians are evil, they make our evil look absolutely cute in comparison. They make it look absolutely adorable. This is why I hate modern politics and modern politicians. Way back when the president, various offices were filled by ordinary citizens who were independently wealthy. They were occupied by Trumps, by Trump-like people. In that way, that they were just privately wealthy citizens, and that's how it should be. That's how you keep your politicians from getting dirty. Career politicians are a mistake. When we created the political class, we created a monster. And if that doesn't exemplify to you, that doesn't exemplify to you what just how awful it can be, then I don't know what's wrong with you. These politicians are dirty as all hell. Why is Trump a great president? Because Trump's not a politician. He's a citizen. He's a citizen running his country, and he's running it right. The British government covered up a pedophile ring. A pedophile child murderer, Thomas Hamilton, who killed 16 children and their school teacher. I mean, how messed up you gotta be to cover that up? How messed up you gotta be? The murders seem to have a connection to the Scottish establishment. Britain really makes me feel an indescribable feeling of disgust. I mean, I have friends, a few friends I've met online in Great Britain, and I sometimes worry about them. I worry about their safety, I worry about their rights, I worry about all sorts of things. This gives me an absolutely indescribable feeling of just disgust when I think about the British government. There was literally a 100-year gag order, which has since been lifted. The idea was to protect the innocent. Since it happened in the early 90s, I would be dead by the time this would have been released. I think it was either the early 90s or the late 90s. It was right on that line. It was right on the cusp of the late 90s, I think. But the gag order was lifted since it was decided it was... I don't know, I guess they just went back on it. The reason was not listed. They didn't really say why. But in a country that lets people out of prison because, oh, they're vulnerable behind bars. The British establishment really is absolutely horrible. The American establishment is horrible. All establishments are horrible. Establishment governments are horrible, I think, is the takeaway here. But Thomas Hamilton is not being released, but the point is they were trying to cover it up. And why? This supposed pedophile ring, which he is a member and is tied to the Scottish establishment. Sometimes I wonder, this is sort of like a Pizzagate type thing. I think there's a fair reason why I should be somewhat skeptical, but at the same time there's an equally fair reason why I think it should indeed be a thing. In all likelihood it probably is a thing, because there's a lot of dirty things going on in Britain that have been proven to be occurring. What's one more thing? But I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that pedophiles are sometimes involved in government. Not always, but sometimes. Because modern establishment politics is dirty and evil as all hell. If you take away anything from this episode of Culture Shock, that is what you should be taking away. I think that is today's lesson. That is today's point. We need to go back to the good old days of civilian politics. We'll be a lot better off. Now, for something a little more light-hearted, although kind of freaky, I'm going to read an article to you about this experiment where 3 people's brains were wirelessly connected like computers. We don't know much about the brain, but we know enough that we can get ourselves in trouble. But the brains of 3 people have been successfully connected for the first time, allowing them to share thoughts, a term neuroscientists have confirmed. The three-way brain experiment has so far allowed participants to play a Tetris-style game and could be scaled up to connect whole networks of people in the near future. ScienceAlert.com reports it works through a combination of electroencephalographs, or EEGs, for recording the electrical impulses that indicate brain activity, and transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS, where neurons are stimulated using magnetic fields. The researchers behind the system have dubbed it BrainNet, and say it could eventually be used to connect many different minds together, even across the web. But apart from opening up strange new methods of communication, BrainNet could actually teach us more about how the human brain functions on a deeper level. Well, hey, that's good. That's great, actually. We present BrainNet, which to our knowledge is the first multi-person, non-invasive, direct brain-to-brain interface for collaborative problem-solving, wrote the researchers in October of 2018. The interface allows 3 human subjects to collaborate and solve a task using direct brain-to-brain communication. In the experiment set up by the scientists, 2 senders were connected to EEG electrodes and asked to play a Tetris-style game involving falling blocks. They had to decide whether each block needed rotation or not. To this, they were asked to stare at one of 2 flashing LEDs at either side of the screen, one flashing at 15 Hz and the other at 17 Hz, which produced different signals in the brain that the EEG could pick up on. These choices were then relayed to a single receiver through a TMS cap that could generate phantom flashes of light in the receiver's mind, known as phosphenes. The receiver couldn't see the whole game area but had to rotate the falling block if a light flash signal was sent. Across 5 different groups of 3 people, the researchers hit an average accuracy level of 81.25%, which is decent for a first try. To add an extra layer of complexity to the game, the senders could add a second round of feedback indicating whether the receiver had made the right call. Receivers were able to detect which of the senders was most reliable based on brain communications alone, which the researchers say shows promise for developing systems that deal with more real-world scenarios where human unreliability would be a factor. And while the current system can only transmit 1 bit or flash of data at a time, the team from the University of Washington and Carnegie Mellon University thinks the setup can be extended in the future. The same group of researchers has previously been able to link up 2 brains successfully, getting participants to play a game of 20 questions against each other. Again, phantom phosphane flashes were used to transmit information in this case, yes or no. For now, it's very slow and not fully reliable, and this work has yet to be peer-reviewed by the neuroscience community. But it is a glimpse at some fanciful ways we could be getting our thoughts across to each other in the future. Maybe even pooling mental resources to try and tackle major problems. Our results raise the possibility of future brain-to-brain interfaces that enable cooperative problem-solving by humans using a social network of connected brains. For now, the research available online, the ARXIV preprint server. Oof. Freaks me the hell out. My thoughts are mine and mine alone. I shouldn't have to share them if I don't want to. But of course they're not forcing anyone, but the fact that anyone would want to is just creepy. I think I found something more creepy than contortionism, which literally gives me the fucking willies. An internet where instead of connecting computers, you connect brains. We are, after all, meat machines with an onboard computer, so who's to say we can't connect those onboard computers? Even if it does freak me out slightly. Oh no, it hella freaks me out. But it is true that this could lead to us understanding more about the mysterious brain organ. And knowing more is always a good idea, especially when you're dealing with something that's so delicate. Trump being blasted, but he defends his decision to get America out of never-ending wars. A campaign promise. He's ending the American war culture. Just like he said he would. And I'm all for civilian government. I'm all for a civilian president who is not a part of the political class. Not a career politician. Not an establishmentarian. Because that's what we need. But I will say, however, that we didn't get the president we wanted. We got the president we deserved. a guy who would come along and fix all our problems as a nation, while at the same time being an accurate representation of who we are as a culture. I mean, come on. What do foreigners say about Americans? Usually, they say we're fat, we love guns, we're rude, we're abrasive, we're constantly smiling, and we're very full of ourselves. While Trump doesn't hit the first two check boxes, he hits all the rest. And you know what? If it looks like a duck, sounds like a duck, but doesn't quite move like a duck, it's probably still a duck. Trump is is an accurate representation of American culture. We got the president we deserved. If you see Trump and don't like the way he acts, you may not totally be recognizing it in yourself. You might want to consider looking in the mirror sometime. But nonetheless, he is correct in his decision. He should defend it. He's absolutely right. No more proxy wars, no more never-ending constant wars in the Middle East. I mean, think about it. Ever since the establishment first came into existence and that a political class was created in the 1960s, we have been in constant wars. From the Korean War in the 50s, this actually goes a little further back. From the Korean War in the 50s to Vietnam, to other wars to the wars in the Middle East, to Desert Storm, Iraqi freedom. Think about it. It's literally been like non-stop, just one after another. Now, why do you think that is? Because the military-industrial complex, it makes them powerful. It makes them big and powerful, and they like it. Trump, a civilian president, is going to end these never-ending wars with his presidential power. He's going to essentially trust bust the warmongering military-industrial complex. That is my opinion on why he is right in doing this. It's certainly something to consider, though. Now isn't it? Finally, the final story for today. STRATCOM horrifies as it shows mass bombing message on New Year's. STRATCOM is the Strategic Air Command of the United States. And they're the ones usually behind carpet bombings and surgical strikes in our wars in the Middle East. While everyone else is showing happy, gleeful messages on New Year's, they show, well, that. That is pretty horrifying. And I think it's a pretty solid statement on America's war culture, where war and such, it has become essentially glorified. I mean, look at all our movies and our TV shows where war is portrayed as either this necessary evil or as a great, wonderful thing. You should listen to Ron Paul talk about that sometime. I mean, I don't agree with everything the guy says politically, but culturally, dude, you can just look at like the glint in his eyes, his resting facial expression, what they call a resting face, where you make no particular expression. The resting face tells a lot about a person and how they really feel on the inside. If you look at Ron Paul's resting face, that is a man who has seen some shit. That is a man who has lived through some shit. And, our Veterans Day used to be called Armistice Day, when we celebrated the end of World War I. And everywhere else in the world, that's still what it is. We changed it into a war celebrating veterans, celebrating military service, celebrating war. We took it in completely the opposite direction. Why is it that war is so awesome in the American mindset? Now you might go all conspiracy theory and say, maybe that's because, that's what they want, so that you'll approve of all the constant wars we're in. But, that's a subject for another time. I think it's time I did a couple more episodes of the Culture Shock Aftershock for the first time in a long time. I'm going to do that this weekend. Normally I like to take the weekend off, so this is not really a 24-hour news cycle. But I cover as many stories as I possibly can. So there's very few gaps, if any. But, because I got to take off sometime, because doing all the research, and then, because I'm just one guy. I'm doing this all by myself. So sometimes I got to take a little time off. But this weekend I think I'll do a little episode on Culture Shock Aftershock about the war culture. Anyway, I got way off track. Whew. Man, this StratCom thing really sent me off on a tangent. At least I didn't ramble. Anyway, that's it for today, folks. I'm out.